he's showing us some of his snakes. There are some of his snakes. And yeah, I've watched him handle a snake before, and I sensed that with the same authority he kind of put that snake in submission, is the same authority he wields the sword of the Lord and puts the real snake, the devil, into submission, with the authority of Christ that's in him. So Raymond is a lawyer as well, and he's specifically a labor lawyer. And so we're going to talk. We have had a slow start, but we're going to ramp this up quickly. And again, apologies from Mark. It just is. I don't even want to. Yeah, as I say, I don't. Let's just move on. So Raymond, I want to say first up is in these discussions around business, and I've said this to the guys that are on again. There's stacks of media. There's information overload at the moment, and you can learn any skill if you want, kind of on Google these days, from a business perspective. But we want to unashamedly make these times bring, a time that we are led by the Spirit and we glorify Christ in our businesses, and really trust His grace in helping us unlock our business, not only now, especially now, but even into the future. And the principles that I trust the Spirit will lead us to are really deep and powerful and glorify Christ in our business. And we smash that sacred secular divide. I know we've spoken about this often. You come from a very keen understanding and love of even the Jewish culture, and acknowledging how the Israelites, bring the kingdom of heaven down to earth. And that means, every sphere of life. So I know we've spoken about that before. But also, let's talk a little bit. So you wield the sword of the Lord on the one hand, but you wield the sword of the law on the other. And I think for the first kind of 20 odd minutes, I'd love to just talk a little bit. I know we've discussed about just even your prophetic sense at a time such as this. There are a lot of guys who've got businesses. It seems like everything is changing. The world has changed, and potentially for good. Just from a spiritual perspective, before we get into the legal, some of the legal jargon and some of the legal, some of the labor law that's going to be helpful at a time. But why don't you just share a little bit about yourself very briefly, and perhaps just a prophetic sense of, and I know God's dropped some stuff in your heart in a season like now. Welcome.
It's such a privilege to be here. Thank you. I'm an employment law specialist. People ask me to help them with anything that relates to employment law. And probably the foremost thought I've had in this season was from reading 1st and 2nd Samuel, the life of David. I got stuck on the passage where David faces Goliath. There's a guy called Malcolm Gladwell who wrote The Tipping Point, among many others. He wrote Blink, which is absolutely incredible. He's written a number of books. Most of us are familiar with him in one way or another. And he wrote a book called David and Goliath, and it's about how the underdog always wins. And in the book, he examines how on the face of it, David didn't stand a chance because Goliath was so much bigger. His armor was so much more massive. His weaponry was far more impressive on the face of it than a leather pouch with 5 stones. And thinking about that, Gladwell then examines, well, that's what it looks like, but what was the reality? What was the physical reality? And you may recall from the story that Goliath had 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot, 24 digits in total. He was the foremost proponent of the digital age. And he had this gigantism. He was massive in relation to others of the time. And you'd have thought that was a huge advantage, but actually it was a massive disadvantage. He didn't stand a chance against a fit, young, agile shepherd who knew how to throw stones at great speed and with great accuracy. David's agility meant that Goliath couldn't get to him, simply didn't have the speed for it, and wasn't able to make contact. Also, David was able to sling the stone from a bit of a distance, whereas all of the weaponry of Goliath required some proximity. So it was really unfair, with all indications to the contrary. It was really unfair to expect Goliath to win that battle. And the thing that struck me about it is that David wasn't looking at the face value of the thing. He was saying, here's an uncircumcised Philistine who dares to defy the armies of the living God. Not just God, which is big enough. I mean, that's the main thing. But the way that David expresses it is the armies of the living God, those who represent God on earth, the very image bearers of God. How dare this uncircumcised Philistine challenge those who bear the image of God? And that was an interesting thought. Then I thought, well, what about the first church? What about the church in the first century? Under Roman rule, the Roman Empire was the most powerful military might that the known world, had ever seen. It was the most vast. It had the biggest army. It had the best equipped army. And it was inconceivable that anybody could stand up to the Roman Empire. So when the Roman Empire aimed its might, its military might, and its prowess and its political influence at the fledgling church and started to persecute the Christians, nobody would have bet money on the church. That would have been a bad bet, you'd think, on the face of it. But actually, what happened is it caused the church to scatter into all the nations, carrying with it the seed of the gospel. And wherever that seed landed, the church grew. And the influence of the kingdom of God spread across the nations and across the face of the globe. And today, nothing remains of the Roman Empire. It's crumbled. And yet the church has grown and has spread pretty much around the world. And you'd have thought that against the might of the Roman Empire, the church didn't have a chance. Actually, the Roman Empire didn't have a chance. It simply didn't have a chance. Because what the gospel required was an impetus for the seed to be spread around the globe. So now we're facing our own Goliath. We're facing our own Roman Empire of sorts. In that we're facing an enemy, COVID-19, with no clear solution. It's spread around the world. It's gripped the hearts of nations in ways that we haven't seen for certainly since 1918. And it's much more immediate because you can switch on your TV or open your laptop or look at your cell phone, and you can see what is happening around the world as economies shut down, as the world finance looks like it's on the precipice. And you'd think to yourself, well, how can the church and how can Christians in business possibly survive this? And I've got to say to you, in my view, this thing doesn't have a chance. This is causing all businesses, and I hope Christian businesses as well, to have a long, hard look at how we're doing things and to consider how to do it better and more in a manner that is more lean. When I was chatting to Mark, I pointed out that you never trim a tree, you never prune a fruit-bearing tree in summer or spring, because all the sap would be lost and you would doom the next harvest. What you do is you wait for winter when everything looks dead. The sap has gone back to the core of the tree, and that's when you prune it. And cutting off unfruitful branches at that point means that when the spring comes, fruit will be in abundance. So I think that if we look at what is happening in the world economies, in the South African economy, and what is happening to business now, as a winter of the soul, where actually things are really hard, and we're having to look at what works and what doesn't work, and get ruthless about cutting out those things that are not fruitful, and focusing our attention on those things which are fruitful, and doing that in a manner which is full of wisdom and integrity and intelligence, with with the weapons at our disposal, we have the guidance of the Holy Spirit. We have wise business leaders, and not only leaders, but just wise people around us to give us good counsel. This can be something that could really set us up for success. And I don't say that, let me tell you, from an abstract perspective. I started a new business in January. This is not theory to me. I've had very little work, remunerative work, in the last month. And it doesn't look like there's a hell of a lot around. But what it's done is it's caused me to sit down, look at the finances, look at what do we need, what don't we need, what can we cut, what can we grow, where must I sow now, so that when the spring rains come and when the sun shines again, where's the growth going to be? So I think that this is an opportunity for us to actually look at things, and that includes people. People who do not add value to businesses and have coasted along without putting their hand to the plow and working. Well, we need to consider whether that's somebody we need to keep. And that sounds hard. But it really isn't. The Bible says who doesn't work shouldn't eat. In one sense, in the work context, I'm not talking about the poor at all. I'm not talking about homeless. I'm not talking about those who don't have jobs. I'm talking about people who are not stewarding their work well. Sometimes it means that those people have to move on. And those are very difficult things. But what I think this is a time for, what this is a season for, is for honest engagement, full of kindness. I can't emphasize it enough. It's got to be kind. But time for honest conversations with ourselves, with our businesses, with our partners, with our business partners, and with our employees. This is the time to speak the truth in love, but to really have honest, integrous discussions about stuff.
Yeah. Ray, I want to get into some of those conversations specifically with employees later, but just to jump on a few things. We'll get back to the Roman road. I want to ask you about the Roman road just now,
Yeah.
but just, in reworking business, and I think we chatted about it earlier today, we were speaking, I mean, my cousin said, if he had 2 weeks, when lockdown was imminent and, the rumors were going around, and I spoke to him, I said, listen, Charlie, I'm pretty sure this lockdown is going to happen. And he said to me, Mark, if I close this business for 2 weeks, I'm never coming back. And then I phoned him probably a week into lockdown, and there he was. He's got a big engineering business. He was working one of the machines, and he was suddenly realizing that actually, because he was just the accountant and not actually on the floor, he realized that when he worked the machine, his productivity went through the roof. And you were sharing also a similar story about a 300 person factory. What was that story? But again, just around reworking your, things.
We get used to normal. Normal is what we do every day and what we accomplish every day. That's our normal. But I've seen businesses that have hundreds of employees, factories, face a strike, and all you have is the management team inside and the striking employees outside. And I've seen productivity increase. Now, obviously, it's not sustainable over any length of time because it requires incredible demand. But it's almost inevitably an eye-opening experience for management to say, hey, hang on a second. Why aren't we achieving 3 or 4 times the level of productivity when we've got 100 feet on the floor that we are with 12? How can this be? I remember one of my clients, big client, had a quite an aggressive union, came on board and was causing disruption. And they contacted me and said, Raymond, we're really worried we're going to take the strike. I said, okay, the way I see this, it's going to take, because of the nature of the dispute, 2 or 3 months for the strike to actually happen. Can you get inventory together so that you can take the strike? Oh, no, that's going to be really hard. We're going to suffer. It's going to going to be a problem. I said, guys, you've got the time. Build a stockpile. Get ready. The strike's going to happen. It's just a question of when. But the more preparation you do, the better this is going to be. And they said, oh, can't we avoid the strike? I said, you can. But the only way to avoid it in the current context is to give in to demands which are ridiculous. You are already overpaying in terms of the sector. And I'm all for generous payment. Employers should be paying more than the minimum. I'm not suggesting they shouldn't. But it was skewed in some of the bands. I said, take the strike. What's going to happen is that employees who behave in a destructive manner are going to behave in a destructive manner. And when they do that, they will be dismissed. At the same time, you're going to find out where the strengths and weaknesses of your business are. Take the strike. As it happened, it took 4 months for them to go on strike. They managed to build up inventory. They put an action team in place. On the first day of the strike, productivity increased. Bear in mind, the vast majority of employees were standing outside. On the second day, the union approached my clients and said, we want to suspend the strike, provided none of our employees faced disciplinary action, because they'd done all kinds of stuff. They assaulted a security officer, they'd broken stuff. They'd stormed into the factory in contravention of an order. So they'd done some bad stuff. My client contacted me and said, Raymond, how dare they? The strike must go on. I'm not prepared to accept the cessation of the strike. We've got an increase in productivity. We've got everybody standing outside. I want the strike to continue. So we were able to get the strike to continue for a little while, for another day. But I've never been in a situation where an employer says, I'd rather the strike continue. And what that revealed to me was actually we don't know what we're capable of until we're in a crisis. When the blade strikes bone, everything changes. And it's a great time to actually reassess and decide what you can live with and what you can't live with.
Yeah.
Or rather, what you can live without. Mike.
So Ray, it is, I perceive, I sense. Listen, maybe you don't even have to be a prophet to know that this is completely game changing. I was thinking to myself in the shower today, I said, this is actually, I remember 2020, everyone, this is clarity, this is going to be clear vision. Everyone had the sense 2020 was going to be big, and no one would have predicted that we would be sitting where we are here. And, so I sense this is we're never going to experience this probably in our lifetime again, and things have changed. But this thing of the Roman road, I mean, I've been preaching it. I believe it. I sense very much that the digital, what we're doing here, I mean, is a new Roman road in many ways. And how do you, what are some of your perceptions around that? And how do you see technology and digital and affecting even your own business? And what is a good perspective around this in terms of the fact, like you said, people in Jesus' day would have seen the Romans the most powerful thing, and maybe they were objected to using the roads then because they were so angry with the Romans that they crucified Christ, and so they would have spited the road and gone on other roads. I don't know, maybe they would have thought that, but the reality is God was using that road to proliferate his gospel. And likewise, is that not what we potentially going to see something with this digitization?
Potentially so. So one of the things that business leaders, economic fundies have been discussing over the last few years, and you'll know this, is about the use of resources and global warming, especially in the context of massive CO2 emissions and pollution. And there are a lot of components to that. There are factories, there's vehicle travel, there's aircraft travel. These are all things that are part of our world and part of the norm, and just part of our normal. It's just how it is. In the few weeks that the lockdown has taken place pretty much in different ways around the world, there's been a massive drop in CO2 emissions. There's been a massive drop in pollution. And there's been a huge change to the way that transport works. So suddenly employers are realizing, hang on, employees can actually work from home and not commute. So that's an hour or two saved. And there are also kinds of challenges with it. I'm not suggesting it's not without it, but it's an avenue that hasn't been considered before because it wasn't necessary to do. People are having business Skype calls and Zoom calls all day, every day, instead of getting on an airplane, flying to Johannesburg or flying to Cape. And I'm not suggesting that face-to-face is not important. Face-to-face is very important. But business can be done without burning jet fuel, without burning commuter fuel, without clogging the highways. People can be trusted, and again, not without serious disciplines, but people can be trusted to get on with work without somebody peering over their shoulders. So that means that you can have a flatter management structure. Quite apart from all of the business initiatives and the software and technology that aids productivity. Now, there's some environments that's not going to work. You can't operate a screwdriver through the computer. But I tell you what, I've had to fix a whole bunch of stuff while we've been in lockdown. And I've been on Google, and I've taken stuff apart and put stuff back together and got stuff to work that I wouldn't have dreamed of doing if I could have just phoned a repair guy.
Yeah.
So what I think we're going to be seeing is businesses saying there are other ways to do this. I've been marketed. You know me. I market by having coffee with people. I can't have coffee with people. So I've been heavily investing my time in other strategies to make contact with people who don't know that they need me yet.
Yeah.
So and that's the reality. Look at the way that we're doing church.
Yeah.
And on that, I think there's a risk in simply replacing one form of naked consumerism with another. Instead of learning a lesson here, I think there's an opportunity for us to say, as Christians, that so much of our engagement with the church and with the resources at our disposal is as consumers. Whereas here, we really have an opportunity as the church to be the church. Instead of consuming, to be doing stuff, to be engaging, to be reaching out to those who are worse off than us, to be motivated by the kindness that sent Jesus to the cross. I think this is really an hour for the church to rise up. And I'm saying this in the business context too. I'm seeing businesses being unbelievably generous. One of my clients, how's this? One of my clients phoned me and said, "Hey, Raymond, how many retainers have you got?" Retainer clients. I said, "I haven't been able to seal one because it's been a small glitch in the works." He says, "You know what? You've been available to help us over the last 2 months. We haven't really done much, but you've been available, and I know that you'll always be available. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pay you a year's retainer from January in advance because I know that you're going to be struggling at the moment."
Wow.
And I was like, are you kidding me? No, it's done. And that's a business, let me tell you, that's been hard hit by this pandemic. They haven't opened their doors yet. But he made an investment. Now I will walk over coal for that guy. I would have done that anyway. But he there's nothing I wouldn't do to help that business.
Yeah.
So he's not just helped me out, and he has, to his enormous credit. But he's made an investment in a relationship that is going to. I'm telling you, with my hand in my heart, he's going to reap massive rewards from for the rest of his life. Certainly for the rest of mine.
Yeah. You know, Ray, it's been interesting with some of these discussions I've been having. I mean, I chatted to Nick last week, and I can see you tearing up just as he did around one of a radical just story in his business. But what's just amazing is one of the things that has come through all the time is this spirit of generosity, and it's just if anything, I mean, the first business book I read, The Greatest Salesman in the World, the test he had to pass was to give his coat away. And it is something that touches the heart of God when we are generous. And as you say, that guy being generous to you he will reap. And it's just a universal principle. It's a God principle that whether you're saved or unsaved is so, so powerful. So I love that, right? I love that story. But let's just get into listen, guys, if you've got questions to the participants here, if you have got questions, I know Trish will get your question now. If you have got some questions around labor and some of the things we're talking about, just shoot them in. I can see the questions. But given we've had a nice just framework around kind of what's happening at the moment, but a huge part of what is happening at the moment with the change is how do we engage with our employees. We, in my own businesses, have had some really, it's just difficult conversations, having to retrench some people, having to short time some people. And I must say, I don't know if we process that, or we've got fortunately a very good compliance person with us. But maybe you can share some of the heart behind labor legislation, because I think often we see labor legislation as another compliance issue, but it really is put in place to benefit both the employer and the employee. And perhaps you could just help us as business owners, just with some wisdom around engaging around, labor issues that are absolutely at the forefront right now.
The bedrock of South African employment law, which is in many respects some of the most advanced in the world, is that employees and employers should be treated fairly. And if you look at the history of jurisprudence going back thousands of years, that was a foreign concept in many respects until the law of Moses and subsequently the Judeo-Christian ethic that influenced the world as the gospel spread around the world. So our legislation didn't fall out of the sky. Whilst it is couched in a human rights-centered manner, and there's some unhelpful elements of that, at its core is the desire for everybody to be treated. And my observation over almost 20 years of practicing is that most of the time it works. There are times it doesn't. And there have been some spectacular failures because people get stuff wrong. But the heart of employment is that everybody should be treated fairly. And I'd like you to think, this is something I speak on often, I'd like you to think about every argument or dispute you've ever had in your life. I guarantee it had one cause. Think of every argument you've had with your parent, spouse, with your children, with your employer, with your employee. It has one cause. There's almost no exception to this. It's an unmet expectation. Somebody expected A and got B. And all the law is, if you think about it, is a codification of expectations. It's the law of the land is the government writing down in law what it expects of its citizens. An employment contract is a record, and it should be a fair record, of what the employer expects from the employee and what the employee expects from the employer. HR policies, disciplinary codes are exactly the same thing. It's simply a record of expectations. So leadership in the context of employment is about honestly and fairly crafting realistic expectations and then executing them fairly and addressing a failure on either party to meet those expectations in a manner that is fair and equitable. That's all it is. So my experience of the employment context is, not only the employment context, but every context, is people prefer bad news to uncertainty. Probably the greatest wartime speech ever given by Winston Churchill told the British people that they had nothing to expect but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. That's not a motivational speech. And the nation rose as one man and followed him. Why? Because we'd rather hear the truth, and we'd rather rally around the truth and pursue adverse circumstances when we know what we're dealing with. Uncertainty is a killer, because what happens is, when there's uncertainty, we fill in the blanks with our own insecurities and our own, to our own detriment, every time a coconut. That's why it's much better to have a brave conversation, an honest conversation. We're in trouble, and we need to look at how to fix this. And if everybody plays their part, there's a way through it. If people don't play their part, they might not be.
Yeah.
One of my friends, probably the best lawyer I know, where long before the lockdown, 2 weeks before the lockdown, started crunching numbers and figuring out what he believed would be the drop in his fee revenue. 2 weeks before the lockdown, he spent a solid 7 days doing nothing but looking at numbers. He then sat with every employee in his business, about 3 people, I think, and said, right, here are the numbers. I'd like you to interrogate them with me. You tell me if I've missed anything. He ran the numbers and he said, right, I think we're going to have to take a certain percentage hit in our income immediately to weather this storm. Does anybody have any suggestions to make, or any comments, any questions? And they thrashed it out in a meeting with everybody present. And everybody agreed to a person, this is what we're going to do. And these are the strategies we're going to put in place. And they put it in place immediately. Now, I can tell you that's uncomfortable and difficult, and no one was particularly happy. But people were secure because the leadership knew what was happening, and they were heading in a direction. I've seen the opposite with many of my employer clients who've left it to the last second. Are they applying for TERS relief or not? Are people getting their salaries or not? And you know what happens when you have uncertainty is you can't be productive. So actually what happened is that you lost an entire month of productivity while the leaders decided, what are we going to do? Because they didn't have a plan. So I think that this is a time for leadership, and leadership includes having honest conversations. And always fight for the future of the person in front of you. And sometimes that means a future somewhere else. But certainly you're always fighting for their future. You're not seeking to pick a battle over the past. You're fighting for the future. And we respond to that. We're hardwired to respond to that. Why did sinners flock to Jesus? It's counterintuitive. He was perfectly holy. Sinners flocked to him because he was kind, and he dealt with their sin with kindness and mercy. Didn't say, don't worry, you're not a sinner. He said, no, don't do this. It's bad. It grieves God, and it's bad for you. Don't do these things. But he expressed it in love. So we're hardwired for it. We will respond to a difficult conversation given in love more than a fudging of reality with a great deal of uncertainty. Certainty is kindness. Uncertainty is unkindness.
Yeah.
That's not my idea. That's somebody else. But true.
Yeah, that's good, Ray. I'm just looking at I don't know if you can see some of the questions here. I think Trish was.
Can't see any.
Okay, so I'll just jump into some of them. This is from Ziggy. My staff been working from home during the last month, which some days within the office. Our turnover has dropped. I've told them that this month they will be paid per hour instead of a set salary, seeing that the turnover has dropped and that they are not working full time. They have now all come back to work, but am I legally allowed to cut salaries? So it sounds
Okay.
sounds to me that you can do short time. I mean, I think we put some of our staff on short time. But yeah, I'm not the lawyer, and I'm certainly not the technology expert either. But you go for it.
Okay, there's several elements there. So the state recognized that whilst the lockdown was on, many employers would shut the whole or part of their businesses. And they called that a temporary layoff. And what that was, and I must tell you that in South Africa, we've never seen a temporary layoff before. But what that was a recognition some people wouldn't be able to work. And the general rule is no work, no pay. And I suppose by extension, part work, part pay. So what the state said was, we're going to assist with UIF in the form of TERS. We're going to assist if you, the employer, can't pay your employees, or if you can only pay them a portion of their salary, we will, as far as we can within the constraint of UIF, make good the difference. But that wasn't changing the law. In fact, the National Disaster Act specifically says that the actions under the Disaster Management Act do not change any aspect of the law unless specifically stated. So the usual rules relating to employment apply, and that includes changing terms and conditions of employment. So while the business was in lockdown and the ability of employees to work was constrained, and as a consequence, the ability of employers to pay full salaries was constrained, there was relief. And that relief is defined, and it's to last for no longer than 3 months. You go back to work now. So we're still in lockdown, right? We haven't come out. If your business is not partially shut down, then and listen, I think that's going to be a wide interpretation, not a narrow interpretation. But if it's not partially shut down, everybody's back at work and they're working as they would ordinarily work. Then there's no reason you can't legally cut salaries. What you can do is put people on short time. And that means that instead of working 5 days a week, they'll work 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 1 day a week, or as the case may be, as a continuation of the temporary shutdown, the temporary layoff. Where the difficulty arises is when the shutdown comes to an end, where we're back at level 1 or it's closed completely, and the economy is kind of almost back to normal. Many employers are going to want to cut salaries as a permanent thing. In other words, not part of the temporary layoff context, but as a survival measure. And that becomes difficult because you can't change the terms of a contract without consent. So if I'm the employer and I sit with my employees and I say, guys, I've been paying you 10 Rand an hour. I can literally, hear the numbers, only afford to pay you 8. And I impose that. They can either strike to prevent you from implementing the intended change, or they can seek an interdict, or they can go to court and seek to enforce the contract of employment because you can't change the terms without their permission. But sometimes employers have to do this to survive. Generally speaking, in terms of Section 1.
Raymond, we've lost you. Oh dear. And that's a mug shot. Ray, Shauno, what do we do here?
Let's just wait for him to reconnect. It might just be his internet.
Okay, might just be his internet. Shauno, yeah, what would you like to add for our attendees here?
Sheesh, I'm lapping this up, buddy. I'm telling you what, I had a question, but I haven't typed it.
Okay. Yeah. Is it Ray's internet, do you think?
Yeah, his internet's dropped.
Okay. Let me jump
Just
on.
gonna reconnect quickly.
He's probably carrying on, not knowing that he's frozen with a beautiful mugshot of himself. Let me just phone him and just see if I can get hold of him. Okay, try and get it back in there, bud, because you need to change that image we've got of you on the screen here. it's a beautiful one. We see if yeah, I'll take a screenshot. But so are you just going to try and reload yourself there? Yeah, okay, cool. There he comes. He's coming back. Just
I'm just gonna
just stop that other one. Ray, I didn't take a screenshot. You can see yourself there. Can you see?
I'm pretty, man. What are you talking about?
Anyway,
so what I was saying was, you can't use the threat of retrenchment as a means to force people to accept changed terms, conditions of employment. However, there are circumstances where if you offer an employee a change to terms and conditions of employment, they say, I'm not prepared to accept that. You take that offer off the table forever. That's really important. There may be a retrenchment following that, and you may then afterwards employ somebody who's prepared to accept those other terms. I must tell you, that is a minefield. It's possible, but it is an absolute minefield. And I certainly wouldn't be doing that without any expert legal advice. And when I say expert, I don't mean garden variety attorneys who don't do labor law as a field of specialization. It is a difficult thing to do. It's possible, but it's like walking through a minefield, honestly. You can't do it blindfolded.
So
does that answer your question?
We'll wait for Ziggy to reply. I think, to be honest, I think she can put her staff onto short time for a season, and I think that's very fair. I think the challenge, like you're saying, is if after that she wants to dismiss or to retrench, that's a minefield. So why don't you she says thanks for the input, I'm sure. And obviously,
sorry, can I just jump in on that? There are different ways to deal with. There's several different ways to deal with it. In addition to ordinary short term, the one is and it depends on whether you're getting full input, so work as normal, reduced input, or no input. So if I was a restaurant, for example, zero input, except if you can deliver takeaways. But you got nobody coming and sitting at the restaurant. Hotels, unless they're servicing essential workers, their rooms are empty. So there, short time probably looks like 2 or 3 days a week, right? But there are other situations where there might just be a shortage of demand that is not as drastic. And maybe you want to say to your employees in those circumstances, listen, we're going to pay 80% of your salary or 50% of your salary. We'll claim the balance from TERS. That won't be the entire amount. The difference between the loss you have suffered this month. So let's say your normal salary is A, you're now paying B, and it's being supplemented by C. But there's a difference. There's still an outstanding amount, D. We're going to record every month your loss, D. And we're going to have it as a credit loan in your name against the business. Because effectively, that's what's happening. You're borrowing from the business. You're lending to the business. And when the business comes back on its feet in 3 months' time and 6 months' time, we'll pay D back to you. Now, not only is that kind and generous, but it also gives that employee a vested interest in getting the business back on its feet. Mm. So and that's just one variation. There are any number of other variations. It requires some intelligent application of different scenarios and models to make it work, so that it's fair to the employee and ensures the employer's survival.
So Ray, what would you say to a lot of small business owners who are not big corporates who've got the finance, who've got the budget to really employ this kind of advice? There's always some stuff that people potentially should do in terms of having the responsibility to steward a business. And there's always some compliance people should get their heads around. Where's that? Perhaps you can just speak a little bit about what employers should do, even though this is not their speciality. They should have certain things in place and should get to know certain things. And when is that line, and how do you suggest they, then and speak about the benefits and how they go about getting legal advice from someone like yourself?
So the Romans had a maxim saying, follow the money. You've got to speak to whoever's responsible for the money in your business. So if you've got a financial director, or the person who does your accounts, or the person who really understands the numbers, you sit with that guy, and that guy's usually conservative. The numbers guy drives the entrepreneur guy mad.
Yeah.
Mark, you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying.
Okay. So you've got to sit with the numbers guy, and you've got to sit with the entrepreneur guy, whoever these are, and it might be somebody outside your business. And you've got to say, we need to build a business plan. Now, as much as we don't know what we're going to do next year, Lord willing, all of those things, but you've got to have a plan. And that plan's got to be populated with numbers. Not my strength, let me tell you. But it has to be populated with numbers. Because if you're going to be looking at doing anything in relation to your employees, it's got to be against a solid business plan. When I advise clients on potential retrenchments, because often employers go to retrenchments first because almost inevitably the biggest overhead is wages. It makes sense to cut heads to save costs. I say to clients, what's the business plan? Because generally, retrenching people is a sign that your current business plan is failing. Now, not always. Nobody planned for COVID-19. But in general terms, what's the plan? What are the deliverables? What's the line that works? The line of business that works? What line of business isn't working? Once you build a fairly bomb-proof business plan, you can then say, right, how do the employees fit into this business plan? Who do I need? What do I need? Because if you don't do the business plan first, you're shooting in the dark. You've got no idea. If you do the business plan first, and then you then embark on a retrenchment exercise, you can say to the unions or to the employees, here's my business plan. I want you to interrogate it. And I want you to tell me where the weaknesses are. And sometimes they'll spot them because you're not in the detail. They'll spot the weaknesses and you'll get some great insight. I've seen many jobs saved through this process because people on the ground have said, hey, wait a second, what if you just tweak this, tweak that? Maybe we can do it differently. But generally, if you've got a solid business plan and you retrench somebody following the correct process, and there's a challenge to that retrenchment, it's very hard for a judge or commissioner of the CCMA to say, well, it's unfair, where you've got a business plan backing it up. Because then the CCMA commissioner or the judge has to step out of their field of expertise, which is law, and now weigh in on a business plan. They're not skilled to do that. They also don't know your business. So from every level, you've got to have a plan. And the Bible tells us that. It says, know the state of your flocks.
Yeah.
Know the state of your flocks. If you don't sow this season, you're going to have nothing to harvest. Go to the end, do all those scriptures. Have a plan. Work it out and stick to it. There's got to be agile. Sometimes you can't stick to it, but have a direction. Without direction, you've got a problem. Sorry, Mark, I interrupted.
Yeah, I think, and I want to get to Devin, just to your question now, but I think also talking to a number of businessmen over this time, and I've said this to myself many times, and it's a very biblical concept, and it kind of goes into this idea of having the discipline to store up a war chest or something for times such as this. And it's almost like an insurance. I remember, again, in my early, maybe far too zealous Christian day, let's not say far too zealous, thinking, why would you even take insurance? That's a lack of faith. Whereas, and then I remember speaking to an insurance expert at the time. He said insurance is potentially one of the most godly businesses around, because it's actually, it's not a lack of faith. It's being wise to the fact that we are living in a world where disaster strikes, and in the same way, we put an insurance policy in place, which is really storing up a little bit. The Bible speaks about store for the day, the same as even potentially in that business plan saying, if I'm going to be employing people, I'm going to set aside a certain amount upfront, which is going to go into a labor fund, for example, or, something to get great input around how from a labor specialist into dealing with my workforce, and to actually put that as a line item in your break even, in your cash flow, and that's actually good business, like an insurance policy. And I think when you start doing those things, as you say, it feeds back to the numbers. If I'm going to run a good business, this is what a good business needs. I need a good accountant. I need good compliance. I need good legal advice, so I'm a great, so I can steward my staff well. And in many ways, that then speaks into, is this a viable business? And I think one of the guys I spoke to today was just saying, if anything that COVID's doing, it's taking all those teetering businesses and it's forcing you to actually say, this business hasn't got legs, shoot the horse now, and just, make that bold decision. But like you say, when you plan and you put the real line items in and say, this is what it takes to run a business, it then almost takes some of the unhelpful emotional decision-making that goes with new ideas. And you're speaking to someone like myself who loves that kind of thing, and becomes unemotional when you put the numbers down, and it becomes about stewardship. It says, if you're going to employ people, make sure that you do it well, and have you thought through it, and have you put a line item there for legal advice. So listen, I think that's a concept, but let's get on to Devon's, unless there's anything
so
you want to
there is something I'd like to add, and from the bottom of my heart I say this. People put off going to lawyers until it's a disaster. They muddle along and stuff it up. Rather pay small money up front, get the advice and don't get it wrong, than muddle along, get it horribly wrong, and then present a scrambled egg that's been burnt to a crisp and say, please unscramble this. It's very hard.
Yeah.
It's much better to get the advice up front than to pay big time later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, I love that. In the property valuations business, external valuers are paid on a commission basis, and they've been paying UIF, and their applications to the Labor Department for UIF returns were declined. Should this be accepted by the company?
No. So UIF made, there's several layers to this. The first is that there was an error in the calculation of TERS payments last month. It was a problem with the program. And my understanding is that that's being addressed. It's not received a lot of press, which is very surprising. But for example, employees who earned at the top brackets, so 17,000, who would have got a maximum out of 6,700, were flatly declined, all of them. So the wrong formula was being used, and my understanding is that UIF is in the process of fixing it, so it might well be rectified. If you've been a contributor as a UIF contributor, the law states, and you'll see this in the guide issued by the department. If you've been financially compromised because your employer couldn't pay the full amount or or anything in the last month during the period of the lockdown, the minimum you will get is 3,500 Rand, provided certain criteria are met. The maximum you'll get is 6,000. That's if you earn 17,000, it's 17,000 some change. 170,000, the maximum you're going to get is 6,700. But a flat declining is it's wrong. And the reason I say that is you might have somebody say, oh, but they don't earn a salary, and these things are based on salary. But the Basic Conditions of Employment Act says that where you earn an income which is fluctuating, I'm paraphrasing, but fluctuates, then what you do is you do a calculation based on the average earnings over the preceding 13 weeks, come to a weekly rate, multiply that, I think it's 4.25 to get to a monthly rate, and that's the number. So simply because they're commission-based doesn't mean that they're not covered by UIF. They're contributors, they're entitled to money.
Ray, just on UIF and TERS, just from your experience in talking to some of your clients and out there, I mean, I've heard definitely some businesses are receiving payments. From what I understand, there's a huge amount of money in that fund, so there's no reason why people should not be receiving payments.
Yeah, there are a couple of challenges. The first is the sheer number. You can imagine a system that was built to handle a couple of 100,000 is now dealing with tens of millions of claims.
Mm.
So there are going to be some delays. I was frankly astonished that people got paid last month. I was expecting a couple of months delay because normal UIF has a 3-month delay. So I was really surprised. That's point number one. Point number two is the forms are a little ambiguous. And I've spoken to small employers who've misunderstood the forms and filled them in wrong, and they're not being paid, and they've struggled to get it fixed. So they've sent emails to the relevant parties, and they've had no reply. Again, there's a backlog. So I think there are a number of reasons for delays, but certainly employees who've not been paid anything, who are expecting to get paid something, be vigilant in protecting their rights and writing emails and demanding an explanation, because the money's there. There's not a lot of it, I mean, in relative terms, next to the number of claimants, but there's certainly money there at the moment.
Raymond, we have gone we've gone an hour because we started late. Listen, guys, it's been wonderful. It really has been. I want to thank you, Raymond. Perhaps you could give us a parting shot, just from a general faith perspective, given your for a whole lot of guys that probably just need to hear some good news, and we all have good news. So why don't you, as I'm talking, think of a parting shot for us? Before you do, I just want to say thank you. It's been an absolute delight. Apologies to everyone for my appalling technical. Don't ever employ me in the tech department. I'm going to endeavor, but I have to get this right by Thursday. So I'm going to be practicing like mad on Zoom and hopefully get this right. Thank you to Sean again. He has been an absolute star for us. Let me just say, Sean Reed has been broadcasting from Westville, and we have really, on our church services, I mean, as you said, everything's changed, and we've managed to pull off incredible live, on Facebook and broadcasting, getting different people in. So he's done so well. So thank you, Sean. I've given you enough time to think, Raymond, now. So give us a parting shot.
Yeah,
I was going to say, not that you usually need any time to think at all. You quick off the gun, but thanks, Ray.
So you remember the story of Lot and Lot's wife? They were warned by an angel, or they were warned by angels. Run and don't look back. Lot's wife, we all know, turned and was transformed into a pillar of salt. And if you go to the region of the Dead Sea, there are these massive salt deposits, mineral salt deposits. And one of them is called Lot's wife. Obviously, her, but But you get the idea. And we often, through a Western lens, read that story and we think, well, she was looking behind her when God said she shouldn't look behind her. And that's why she turned into a pillar of salt. So she was looking back. Actually, in the Middle East, your past is in front of you because you can see it. Your future is behind you. So she was looking back, she was looking into the future with fear, and she became immobilized and barren because nothing grows in a salt field.
Mm.
So we've got to trust that God is in our future. And it may be a difficult future. It may be a future with all kinds of adversity. But God is there. We've got to look to the future with the certainty that we serve a kind and merciful God who knows that we're but dust and sees to our every need. If we look to the future with fear, we become immobilized and we become barren and unfruitful. We look to our past, which is in front of us, because that's where the goodness of God is. We've seen God do kindness and come through and be merciful and gracious, even though we haven't deserved it, time and time and time again. Built into the idea of testimony is repetition. Do it again, do it again, do it again. God is kind, God is gracious, and God is faithful.
Yeah. Oh, that is superb. And Albert, Raymond, I mean, so I just picked up a question from Albert, so we might have to just extend that, but that was absolutely beautiful. We had Retrench recently. It wasn't easy to do. Can you do one more? Can we do one more? Sorry, there's one more here, Ray. I mean, I just saw we've got a chat as well as we've got Q&A here. We had to retrench some employees recently. It wasn't easy to do. If I told the employee I will always fight for the future of the employee, I would feel like a hypocrite. Can you please elaborate on that, Raymond? Did you get that, Ray?
100%. So, fighting for their future means doing the right thing, even if that has an adverse effect on them now. Because it makes no sense to keep an employee and close the business. That's not good for that employee or for anybody else. So whenever you have rights, you have countervailing rights, balancing them out. So the right to employment, for example, is sometimes at odds with the right to economic activity. You balance. When you employ somebody, you do not guarantee their continued employment. Fighting for their future means that you're being honest about where you are and the extent to which they have a future in your business or not. You know, it's unkind. It's not being honest about that.
Yeah, geez, that's a good one. You know, Ray, I mean, we had to retrench some guys as well, and it was honestly, my business partner said it was the worst day of, since his dad died, and but you feel so guilty, because you carry these guys, but at the end of the day, aside from, we're honest, but also we got to trust God. Like God, if people will look to Christ in whatever circumstances, He will lift them out of the miry clay and make a plan. And sometimes those adverse conditions have a much bigger play in those people's lives. So, but I really appreciate. I mean, for me personally, that response is very helpful as well. So, great question. I won't say your name again because I don't know if you want to keep that. Keep that anonymous. But Raymond, again, thank you. What we did is we just flowed. We went straight from the spiritual depth and heights and widths of great revelation right into a direct labor question, which is such a beautiful picture for all of us of just walking out our faith in work, in the marketplace, and in our our churches. So Ray, you are a wonderful testimony, a great thing. I'm sure we're going to do this again. There's always more. But guys, thank you for being part of this. It's been wonderful. Ray, thank you. And God bless you, Raymond. And let me pray for your business. Father, we just thank you.
Please, bring it.
Yeah, we really do. Lift him up now. We thank you that he is full of faith, that he loves you, Jesus, that he honors you. Thank you for his wisdom tonight. Thank you for the Maneses family. And we just ask you, and we thank you for that seed that was sown by that radical businessman. And we just thank you, Jesus, for the testimony of that. We just pray a blessing over Raymond's business right now. We pray you open up heaven and you honor his faith in your mighty name. Amen. Thank you, Ray. Thanks, bro. Thank you, guys. We'll see you around. Take it easy. Thank you, Sean.